we have to talk about the Philadelphia Flyers because they continue to make some cuts to their roster. We're actually going to take a gander here really quickly at players that were cut yesterday. So if you have not been keeping up with the Flyers and you're like, hey, I remember hearing the name Alex Bump as a guy who could potentially make the roster. Hey, what about Denver Barkey? That's a guy that I've heard of. I heard that Helge Grans or that Emil Andre could be on the opening night roster. Hey, whatever happened to Alexei Kolosov? We got some clarification on it. We got a little bit of an idea of what's going on over in Flyers land. I'm going to take the comments down here for a second, and we'll bring it back up in a minute. But Kevin Kurse, thank you to him for putting this out. But this was yesterday, so these were the most recent cuts as of Tuesday. Barkey assigned to the Phantoms. Alex Bump sent to the Phantoms. Emil Andre and Helge Grans are probably the two names that pop out the most. We knew that Bjarnason was going to be sent to the Phantoms. We knew Kolosov was going to go to the Phantoms. That's your goalie duo, presumably all year, until Sam Ersson hurts his groin or whatever, and then Kolosov has to go up, and then we all start to pull our hair out. So we knew that the goalies were going down. That's not a surprise. Barkey, we figured was going to go down. Bump is interesting because there was a point in time, and it goes back to rookie camp and dev camp, when there was a thought that Bump was going to have a legitimate shot to make the roster. And one of the things that was kind of built on was that Tyson Forster wasn't going to be ready for the first month or so of the season, right? Like that timeline kept shifting. And it was, is he going to miss the first half of the season? Is he going to be back by November? Will he be back by October? Will he be a participant in training camp? And as Forster's outcome and outlook started to improve, the inverse reaction was that Bump's chances of making the roster dropped. And we got to see Nikita Grabenkin start to make a legitimate push to make the roster. Now, there was a thought at rookie camp and then going into training camp that Grabenkin might have a chance, outside chance, some kind of chance to make the roster. And it feels like he has more than put himself on Rick Tockett's radar. And I would almost be surprised if Grabenkin doesn't make the opening night roster. So Bump falls off, which is disappointing if you're somebody that wanted to see Bump make it. And listen, there was a thought that, hey, if Porter Martone is going to play for the Flyers, what does that do to Bump? What does that do to Grabenkin? And this kind of matters, I guess, if you're looking at which wing these guys play. But it seemed like a month and a half ago, things were lining up for Alex Bump to make the team. He didn't. I saw somebody tweet, it was either at Kevin Kurse or at Charlie O'Connor, and they were like, what a disappointment. Another whiff by the Flyers. And it's like, this is where you start to really figure out which people are legit and which people aren't. This is where you start to figure out if somebody's totally full of shit or not. It's one of those things that kind of makes you kind of sit back and go, are you aware of where this player was taken? Are you aware that this wasn't like a first round pick? Like, did that occur to you? Because he wasn't. And yet there are people going, oh, well, it's truly disappointing. He was drafted 133rd overall. 133rd overall. It's not a disappointment. He was taken in the 2022 draft. The fact that he made it as far into camp as he did before being cut, before being sent down to the Phantoms, is actually kind of a testament to him finding success. Now, and this is where I'm going to bring the comments back because I think it's going to be important. The defenseman is where you maybe have an issue. The defenseman is where you maybe find yourself scratching your head. Because Emil Andre, if you've watched preseason, has looked like an NHL defenseman. Emil Andre's problem is something that he can't control. He's not a big defenseman. And this team already has a number of small-ish defensemen. Cam York isn't gigantic. Jamie Drysdale isn't gigantic. Sanheim's a big dude. Risto is a big dude, but Risto is not in the lineup, right? Risto's probably going to miss the first month or two of the season. So they have a bunch of small guys. They want to be bigger on the blue line. This was a point of contention last year when teams were reaching out to the Flyers about the availability of Rasmus Ristolainen throughout last season. They didn't want to move Risto if they didn't have another big body to plug in. They certainly didn't want to replace Risto's size with a small defenseman like Andre. Now, I've seen a lot of Flyers beats putting out the idea that Andre wasn't given every opportunity. He was, but within reason. And I understand that there's a thought out there. You feel the most talented team you can. And I largely agree. But when you're as small at the blue line as this team is, it is kind of hard to reconcile being that small and that skilled, right? But not having any kind of oomph. And for a Flyers team that isn't like on the precipice of competing for a cup, I don't say I agree with it, but I guess I understand why the Flyers are kind of leaning more into the almost stereotypically one-zone defenseman. We are going to have big defensive defensemen. Good luck. Now, Helge Grans is actually the one that surprised me because I thought Helge Grans had played well enough that he deserved stronger consideration. And I thought, we talked about this on Snow the Goalie the other day, but I thought that there was a chance that Helge Grans could end up making the roster to start. He's 6'3". So if Emil Andre is too small for you, Helge Grans is a bigger body dude. He's not gigantic, but he's a bigger defenseman. And if you're going to have a young guy that's going to develop at the NHL level, I thought Helge Grans had a good chance of doing it. He's not going to. He goes to the Phantoms. Now, the good news, if you want good news, is that Andre and Grans are going to play every night. They're going to play significant minutes, and they're going to have the opportunity to develop at the AHL level, which might even be better suited to them. But it is a little bit disappointing. So this takes us to all of the what remains. Who's still up? Who are the final cuts going to be? Who are the guys that we're going to ultimately have to look at and decide, will this guy make the roster? Well, it sounds like Rodrigo Abels is still in the mix. Jet Lachenko is still in the mix. Nikita Grabenkin is still in the mix. Things are about to get very interesting because there's also been the idea floated out there that you might see more defensemen ultimately make the team. So I was looking at the lineups from practice today because I'm obviously not down there. I'm doing my regular job. I'm not going to travel to the Flyers training facility, the Flyers training center to go cover freaking training camp, to go cover this preseason stuff when I have an actual big boy job. But I noticed that they still have Juleson. There's a thought that Ginning could end up being one of the final defensemen to make the team. Samula somehow is still in the mix, even though he kind of stinks. And then Gilbert's also out there as well. And so on the ice, they had 4 defensive pairings. Then they had Grabenkin with Couturier and Konechny. I think Grabenkin's going to make the team. I will plant my flag in the soil. I think that Nikita Grabenkin will ultimately make the Flyers opening night roster. And I think he's earned that opportunity. We saw Tippett with Zegras and Mishkov. Interesting. Some speed on Tippett's side of the ice. A lot of creative playmaking between Zegras and Mishkov. Goal-scoring threat, obviously, in Mishkov. Forster, Cates, and Brink. That line worked last year. It should work again this year. Then the fourth line was Delorier, Dvorak, and Hathaway. Now, if you want my honest thought, which you probably should and you probably do if you're here, I understand when people get frustrated with the idea of having veterans play over young guys. I think that at this point, especially based on the last preseason game, I've been very critical of Jet Lachenko, and I am not impressed at all with his offense in terms of his ability to score. I don't even think he's impressed with his ability to score. Because if you watch Lachenko in the last game, he was unbelievably hesitant to fire the puck at the net. I mean, you could have pointed a bazooka at Jet Lachenko's head and said, hey, shoot the puck. And he wouldn't do it. But what I did see from Lachenko is the speed that they rave about, the strength that they rave about, and the vision is there. The vision that Lachenko showed in the last preseason game was something I was really impressed by. So I'm almost willing to an extent to say, all right, I don't exactly love Lachenko's inability, unwillingness to shoot, reminiscent of Ben Simmons, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, not really, but maybe. I'm not thrilled with the fact that the guy just looks so hesitant to shoot the puck. But if every other element and every other aspect of his game and the mental and the coachability intangibles are at NHL level, then I would say it's probably better to have Jet Lachenko up here to start the season and then make a determination than it is to send him back to Guelph, because he ain't going to get better playing junior this year. I said on Snow the Goalie the other day, the only way I would want to see Jet Lachenko go back to junior is if he's going to go down there and his entire sole focus this season is going to be goal scoring. And that next year when he comes back to camp, that he's going to be ready to go. He's going to be ready to be a fully rounded threat in the offensive zone, winning the puck back in the neutral zone, and certainly being a 200-foot player and playing solid defense when called upon. Maybe even becoming a PK threat. I would love to see that for Lachenko. If he goes back to junior, he better learn how to score goals. But if everything else is lined up, I have no problem with him making the team, which then takes us to a guy like Dvorak. Well, Dvorak was one of your free agent signings. I kind of had a question about where Dvorak was going to fit on this team. Wasn't necessarily sure that Dvorak should be on the team. Could he be blocking somebody? If Grabenkin is going to make the team like I think he will, and Lachenko is going to potentially make the team, and Dvorak is going to be on the team, then for better or worse, the guy that I think, right, the guy who's probably the odd man out is Rodrigo Abels. And I'm not sure that that's entirely fair to Rodrigo Abels because he's looked good in the preseason. And he's been able to pot some goals. And so you go, all right, if it's a meritocracy, if you're earning every bit of playing time, Rodrigo Abels doesn't deserve to be sent down. And at the same time, I'm not sure that Jet Lachenko going down to junior is going to be the best thing for his development. And that is where we hit a very uncomfortable conversation. Merit-based versus that idea of like sunken costs shouldn't factor into future expenditures. We're kind of there with Lachenko where you go, first round pick. Has he earned himself a guaranteed spot on the team? No. Do we like the alternative if he doesn't? Not really. So we're going to keep him here instead of send him to a potentially worse situation back in junior. I don't love it at all, but I'm not sure what the Flyers are supposed to do otherwise. So part of me thinks Lachenko might end up making the roster. Now, the real question here, the real awful thing would be if the Flyers decide to roll with 8 defensemen to start the season. I don't know why you would. It seems insane. I don't know who's not making the team. I mean, Zamula stinks. York, is going to be on the team. Sanheim, Sealer, Drysdale. Ginning has been okay. You brought Gilbert and Juleson both in to compete for a spot, maybe be the 7th defenseman. I think Zamula stinks. I'm not impressed. I was not impressed last year. Mishkov's English has gotten significantly better. Don't know if you need the translator on the bench anymore. I'm kind of shocked by the way that they seem to be looking at Zamula as a foregone conclusion for making the team. I feel like some of the defensive choices they're going to make are going to lead to at least one guy getting sent down to the Phantoms. It's going to make you go, ugh, disappointing. But that's where we're at with the Flyers right now. Goalie situation. Has it gotten better since the last show? Nope. And I didn't even bring this up because it's kind of annoying, but remember how everybody was really, really excited about Oliver Bonk? Remember how everybody was super, super stoked about seeing what Oliver Bonk had to offer this offseason and see if Oliver Bonk was going to have a legit chance to make the team out of camp and all that lovely stuff? Yeah, it ain't happening. And it's actually, to me, it's probably more of a concern than they think it is. But the Flyers put this out. In addition, so the second part of the tweet, Oliver Bonk, upper body injury, will be out approximately 2 weeks. This was an injury that was supposed to be day-to-day, and it has somehow morphed into a 2-week injury. And to be essentially non-contact and non-participatory, and now get to the point where here we are going down to final cuts. There was potentially an opportunity. If Bonk had really, really impressed through training camp and through the preseason, could Bonk have made a case to make the team? I would have been surprised. But maybe, just maybe, he would have had an outside chance to be one of the final cuts, maybe make the team. The lack of availability is like one of those things that starts to hamper you. And if you are a player who was drafted as highly as Bonk was, I'm not saying we're certainly not at bust territory yet. We are certainly not at this guy is going to stink and he's going to be, a waste of a pick. But this is not a great time. This is not a great time to be injured. It's not a great time to not have the organization get to take an actual look at you. So this day-to-day thing that's now turned into a 2-week injury, which is actually longer than that, is not good. Not good at all. And I wonder if this is going to become something that we're going to see a continuation of. I mean, is it going to be 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks we find out he's out another week, he's out another 2 weeks? I don't know. But it's not great. So if you're a Flyers fan, the Oliver Bonk news is probably the biggest downer, I guess, of the day. But we'll see. We await the final cuts for the Flyers. I think Rabenkin's played himself into a spot, and I do think that ultimately they're going to say Lachenko makes it. Rodrigo Abels, good dude, has had a nice preseason, had some good spurts last season. He's not one of the guys that you're looking to build your team around. He's 29, which isn't a bad thing. You don't hold it against him that he's 29. However, compared to like what you want to be able to get out of and develop out of Lachenko especially, are you going to use up one of those last roster spots for Abel? I'm not sure that you are.